Hey everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for our first live stream ever. My name is Anna. I'm one of the co-founders and organizers with Main Access Points, and we're really excited to have this new format. For our first live, we're going to do a naloxone training today, talk about overdose prevention, how to use naloxone, how to respond to an overdose, and also tell you a little bit about MAP, who we are, what we're up to, and use this virtual platform to really try to connect with a lot of our folks who support us and care about harm reduction and care about what we're doing here in Maine. So thanks again for joining us. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitch, we're also on YouTube. You can catch us any of those places. Everything today will be recorded, so the stream will be posted up on our YouTube page. We also have a chat that we really hope you'll join us in today. Everything is integrated between the platforms, so you can chat with each other across platforms, chat with us, ask us questions, but also feel free to comment and share a little bit about your experience or what your tips are. We really want you to be a part of this training as much as possible and really use this as a space for us to hang out and connect. It's been very difficult during COVID to find spaces where we can be together, and we're really trying to find some creative ways to hang out and get some time with our community. So we're really excited about that as well. I'm gonna introduce and turn it over to Hillary and Chastity. Do you want to go, Hill?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Hillary, and I am part of the MAP team. I really focus on the overdose education and naloxone distribution part of the program. I use the pronoun she and her, and I'm really excited to be here today for sure. Go ahead, Chas.
I'm Cassidy Poole. I'm way down in Washington County, or way east, however you want to look at it. I am, oh my God, getting messages in my personal account now too. I run the mobile syringe access program in Washington County and was a naloxone distributor for MAP before I became an employee. So now back to
Yeah, so, I think we wanted to provide a little conversation just about who we are and the work that we do at MAP, a little bit more about some of the upcoming trainings that we're putting together, and then we'll get started into the naloxone training. Like Anna said, we really hope that this can be conversational as much as it can be through chat. I know that I've been in trainings where it's been really dynamic, and so that's exciting. So we'll kind of move, through some of your questions as they come in, but we'll also definitely leave time at the end as well. So just a little bit about Main Access Points. Our mission is to recognize the resiliency of people who use drugs and to work in collaboration to create access points for overdose prevention and harm reduction services in Maine. And we do that, a lot of different ways. So for our services, we provide community-based naloxone distribution and overdose prevention services. That really looks like this beautiful team of naloxone distributors that we have across the state who train and distribute naloxone in their community. And I see some of you here, which is really exciting. We also have a phone that folks can call or text or signal to reach out for naloxone in training, and we always get back in touch within 24 hours of that request. We have 3 syringe access programs, one in York County and Sanford, Washington County that Chastity coordinates, in Calais, and then we also provide mail delivery of syringe access supplies in Maine. we really value kind of the connection and the aftercare that can come through our relationships. And so if you access naloxone from us or safe use supplies or just connected to us through community, social media, you can always reach out for that aftercare and support if you've experienced your own overdose or responded to someone else, or if you're holding grief and loss. We're really here to show up in the ways that work for you. So you can call, you can text. We're happy to meet. We really just want to show up and hope that always these naloxone trainings are kind of the start of that relationship, kind of ongoing support, ongoing access to naloxone and the community that we're part of. We also do collective organizing, advocacy, policy work. And help other programs to make sure that they're trained up in harm reduction and have, the skills and supplies they need to be able to address overdoses in their communities. So that's a little bit about us. And, like right now during COVID, a lot of these services have transitioned to at a distance model, right? Like mail, a lot less kind of in-person time together. And so like Anna was saying, when, as we've situated into this model and really, worked to provide the safest service provision, we also really wanted to figure out how we can connect together. And so this was one part of it, which was doing kind of these education sessions and knowledge sharing sessions. And we knew that there were a lot of things that we wanted to talk to people about that we weren't necessarily the person to have that conversation. And so, as we move through these monthly trainings, you'll get to know a lot of our partners, our friends who are providing like really beautiful skills in their community. So we're going to have upcoming trainings on hepatitis C. We're going to have a conversation on drug testing, on birth work and birth plans, for legal rights, knowing your rights, and trying to figure out some others ongoing. We really want to hear from people too. So if you have ideas of things that you want to get trained up on, that you want to learn more about, whether it's putting together this, a session like this, or having some program literature on it, we really want to make sure that we're getting the information out that's meaningful to our community in Maine, but also elsewhere. And I guess I'll just say, like, that's been really exciting that we are connecting with people all over the country and all over the world in ways that we wouldn't normally be able to do. So the only other thing before we kind of move into the naloxone training is that we're going to start offering harm reduction drop-in hours once a month for the next, foreseeable future while we are providing these services at a distance. And, we don't really know what the harm reduction hour drop-in hours will look like. We just know that it's important to have a space for people to be together, support each other, show up in conversation. And so the first harm reduction drop-in hour is going to be February 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. And I'll just say that, we utilize Zoom. We're really open to hearing about other platforms for it as well. But there's no, our whole program is based on like anonymity and confidentiality. And so if you show up to any of our, naloxone trainings or harm reduction drop-in hours, you like really don't have to use your video. You can adjust your name so that it feels safe, right? Like we want to be able to meet people in a way that feels right. So yeah, you can see in the chat box, February 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. Chastity and I will be there to spend some time with you all.
And on that note, I think that was a really important point. If anyone wants to join in the chat today and doesn't want to be identified with your name that might be on Facebook, you can catch us on Twitch or YouTube if you change your username. That way you can chat with us more anonymously if that's something you want to do.
Cool, thanks, Anna.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll kind of move into the naloxone training. I've been starting, so we do these, weekly virtual trainings via Zoom, and I've started sharing these words from our friend and mentor, board member, Eliza Wheeler, because they're really meaningful to me, and they really like help situate how MAP approaches these conversations in these trainings. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this. I'll just say, for anyone that wants to have like slides from this training, or really want some program literature, I know for me, I really like to kind of see things after. And so you can reach out to us via email. Anna can put our information in the chat box, and I'm happy to send all of this along. So I'm just going to take time to read this really quick. So when we think of overdose prevention, of reviving people with naloxone, we do not think of it as a simple public health intervention. We think of it as an act of restoring life, of air, of breath, of allowing for the energy in a human being to begin moving again, to be reanimated. The concrete life-saving act of administering naloxone and restoring breath is also a symbolic act of friendship, of connection, and of a radical refusal to allow someone to die alone of a preventable death. The act of restoring life to a friend, a family member, a stranger, this has deep ripples outward, re-envisioning the way we treat each other and the ways in which we see each other and value the lives of people who use drugs. So these conversations are really important to have. It's an act of solidarity with each other. And I also just recognize that depending on our lived experience, we all come to these conversations with a lot of different experience. And so sometimes it can bring things up, right? And so if you find yourself needing to step out of the conversation, you can reach out to me after, and we can do a one-on-one individual training. If you need to step deeper into conversation, I'm here for that. We all are. And so again, we'll, provide our contact for you, and just know that this is kind of the beginning of a conversation, and we're here to hold it kind of however it shows up for you. So on that note, I'm going to send it along over to Chastity to kind of get started on the basics here.
So we're going to jump right in with what is an opioid overdose. As I ask questions, feel free to, throw your answer in the chat. Hopefully, if I don't see it, Anna will, so we'll get it addressed. Opioid overdoses happen when there are too many opioids or a combination of opioids and other drugs in the body that your breathing eventually slows down and will eventually stop. This happens because opioids fit into specific receptors that also affect the drive to breathe. So when we talk about naloxone, it's really just helping someone to breathe again. That's it, and really as basic as it needs to be. Obviously, it's much bigger, but it's just helping someone to breathe again. Opioids include pharmaceuticals like oxycodone, hydrocodone, morphine, then fentanyl, whether the pharmaceutical or the man-made fentanyl, heroin, MAT medications like methadone, Suboxone. And even though technically there's other drugs that now have are laced with fentanyl, so even if someone, you don't think they use opioids, they like benzos or there's always the risk now that there's going to be opioids in it, so better to be safe. What is naloxone? Sorry, I have to look at the list to know where I'm going. Naloxone, a lot of people know it as Narcan. Narcan is just the nasal version of it. We do have that, but we primarily do the intramuscular version. It's a medication that is an opioid antagonist, so it's used to counter the effects of an overdose. It will not cause harm if it's not an overdose. So I always tell people, when in doubt, just give it, because it won't hurt. And I've actually been one of those ridiculous people that I've had people inject me just to show that it'll do no harm. you guys didn't hear that, but um, it's a non-scheduled prescription medication, and it's legal for people under 18 to have. That's always a big question I get about whether younger people can carry it, and it's perfectly legal. It may be injected in the muscle or sprayed in the nose. Um, so the big thing is it counteracts life-threatening depression of the central nervous system and respiratory system. So it's just helping someone to breathe normally. I always use my hands and show like it's just pulling it off the receptors and going in between the opioids in the brain because it has a stronger affinity to the receptors than opioids. However, it's also short short lasting, but it works. Um, if there's no opioids, there's no effect whatsoever. So it comes in different forms. The nasal Narcan, like you can see on the screen, the auto injectors, which are super cool, but also super expensive, and the intramuscular. And that's primarily what Main Access Points uses.
So moving into risk factors. So what puts someone at a higher risk for experiencing an overdose? So we'll go over a few. First off, mixing multiple substances. Anytime we're using more than one drug, we're at a higher risk for overdose, right? It doesn't matter if we're using two depressants or a depressant and a stimulant. It can be stress on the body. It can affect our breathing and our pulse, and we can experience an overdose. So it's really important to know like what are high risk combinations, right? An example, benzos and an opioid. And you know, always kind of starting with the substance that is stronger to kind of get your baseline, and then adding something else into it. Next up, decreased tolerance. So anytime someone has a low tolerance, they're at a higher risk for overdose. And someone can experience a low tolerance if they've never used before, or if they've decreased or stopped use. So if someone has been in detox, or if they are being released from incarceration, if they've been in a time of abstinence or decreased use during recovery. These are all times when someone's body isn't going to be used to that substance, and it's going to have a stronger impact on it. So using less, going slow, doing a tester shot, right? Being in communication with other people about what you're using. Having naloxone and someone around are all really important steps to take when we know that, you know, someone's at risk with a lower tolerance. The third one, an unpredictable supply of drugs, right? The quality of our drugs in Maine is certainly unpredictable, and it's only gotten worse with COVID. And so I think that it's really important that, again, you know, we're in conversation, right? We're in conversation with community. So something that MAP does is if we know that there's been a high risk supply in a certain area of the state, we're going to get that information out there. And we receive that from program participants, from our community of people, letting us know when they're experiencing a high risk supply of drugs. You know, it's really like Chastity was saying before, it's really important to be testing our drugs, assuming fentanyl and opioids, right? And then making sure that if we are using stimulants or another substance, that we're still, testing for a contaminated supply, regardless of what, you know, we normally are using, making sure that there is naloxone available in case there is fentanyl, say, in someone's cocaine. You know, the importance of having a reliable and consistent supplier, someone who's going to be in communication if there is a higher risk supply that they are selling. That's really important as well, having those relationships. What else? I think that's it. So next up, using alone. Certainly you're not at a higher risk of overdose by using it alone, but you're at a higher risk of dying from an overdose by being alone because there isn't someone there to respond. So, the messaging has always been don't use alone. When you are with someone, stagger your use. So at any given time, someone can respond to an overdose that's happening. And that's super important. But we also know that, folks are in the situation to be using alone all the time. And again, that's only increased in this time of like severe social isolation. And so, what does safety look like when you are alone? Sometimes it's as simple as keeping the door unlocked so someone can access you. Other times, maybe you can't have someone in person, but you can have someone on the phone. So reaching out to a friend, letting them know that you're concerned and that if you're unresponsive, this is the plan that you want to have happen. So coming up with, your community, if you are together or alone, about what does our safety plan look like if someone's overdosing. And then health. So anytime one part of our system is under stress, that's going to have an impact on the relationships with the drugs that are being used. So if someone has a compromised immune system, if they have an active infection, if they are malnourished or tired, dehydrated, these are all times when someone's at a higher risk for overdose. Beyond that, when we think about an opioid overdose being respiratory in nature, if you have a compromised respiratory system, if you have asthma or COPD or complications and symptoms associated with COVID, these are all times when you're at a higher risk. And so, the prevention on that seems simple sometimes, right? Eat, drink, sleep, see a doctor, carry your inhaler. But we know that systemic violence and systemic neglect creates barriers for folks to be able to access those basic needs. And so that's why at MAP, we really situate as an organizing entity as well, a mutual aid program, caring for each other, helping each other, survive, and while at the same time fighting for like this big system change. I think that's it. Am I missing anything, you guys? No.
I think the only thing I'd add is just when you think about mixing multiple drugs, often we're really thinking about multiple drugs that repress the breathing or the respiration. But one of the things that we found is just like through our own experience and, through research is that like even combining stimulants with depressants increases your risk for overdose because the stimulant makes your heart race really quickly. It uses up a bunch of that oxygen. And so while there's depression of the breathing, there's also increased oxygen need, and that increases your risk for a worse outcome. And so I think having that awareness of the interactions of drugs is so, so important and so, so challenging, like Hillary and Chastity were saying, just because of how difficult it is sometimes to know what's in the supply. But knowing that any mixing can kind of put you at risk and just being prepared for that, I think is something to add. Yeah.
So just a little myth busting. And, we have this conversation because there's just a lot of misinformation and it's hard, right? Like with the increase of fentanyl in the drug supply, we've experienced a lot of grief and loss. And so there is a lot of fear. But at the same time, there's a lot of misinformation happening. And so together, there can be this hysteria. And so we want to be really clear about a few things. So first off, fentanyl powder is not absorbed through the skin, right? It's not like a fentanyl patch. And so we're not at risk of overdose by touching fentanyl or touching someone who is overdosing on fentanyl. And that's really important. We want to feel safe in being able to respond to someone that's overdosing. So we are not at risk of overdose by touching fentanyl. Similarly, like sometimes there's fear of a contaminated air supply. And like you can see on your screen, it would just take so much fentanyl over such a long period of time, to have an effect through a contaminated air supply. And even that is just so unlikely. That's not something we need to worry about. And then finally, and really important, naloxone works on fentanyl. So sometimes people are told that fentanyl is naloxone resistant, and that's not true. If we think that someone is overdosing on fentanyl, we always want to give naloxone because it will work. And so there, it's not resistant to the naloxone.
So, how do we recognize an overdose? Like on movies, this is always my favorite thing to say. Like on movies, it's always like someone's found with a needle in their arm dead. And that's not the reality. It happens, but it's very rare. That's just not the reality, that it's always an instantaneous thing. So, some signs and symptoms are unresponsive. They look like they could be sleeping, but you aren't sure. Maybe awake, but kind of zoned out and unable to talk, slow, shallow, erratic breathing or no breathing, a limp body, slow, erratic heartbeat, being really pale or clammy, blue or purple fingertips or lips, or the choking sounds, like the gurgling sounds. And that's like a sound you never get out of your head after you hear it. And if you hear it, you'll recognize exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I missed any. There's always one. I don't know if it's real, but I've seen it so many times that it just always sticks out to me. The like having the limp body and a person looks like they're sitting in a chair, but they're not sitting in a chair. I don't know why that's so common, but I've seen it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
So now Hill for step response.
So I guess like just one thing I would say about signs and symptoms is that not all the signs and symptoms will present in every overdose. And so we're kind of using those as a tool to assess that, but we aren't necessarily looking for all of them. And so you'll see that in our overdose response, we really focus on checking for responsiveness. So for that first sign and symptom of unresponsive. So we'll go ahead and train you on these 4 steps: checking for responsiveness, calling 911, providing rescue breathing, and administering naloxone.
So when you're checking for responsiveness, there's a couple things you can do. You can use noise, be loud, tell someone, hey, I'm going to Narcan you, I'm going to call 911. Just try to get some response from them. Pain is another way, whether you shake someone or do a sternum rub, which is very, very painful, like the 2 fingers and rub it into their chest. If they are awake and aware, they will pop up for that. Checking someone's airway, tilt their head and lift their chin and check their breathing and clear their airway. And sorry, I put a tickle in my throat. And you may have to do rescue breathing. Do the first couple breaths and get things set up. If you have not been trained in CPR, we can't train you in CPR, but we can talk you through it if needed. So then we go on to 911, Hal.
Yeah, so once we've set someone up for rescue breathing, I'll just say, like, ideally someone's on the ground lying down. We're going to, like Chastity said, tip their chin back, plug their nose, make a seal of our mouth to theirs, give those 2 breaths, and then we're going to call 911. And I'll just say that we just believe that this is a really complicated step, and it's a really complicated step for a lot of our community. And so we take time talking through this part. So in Maine, we have Good Samaritan laws that protect some folks from arrest at the scene of an overdose. But we know that people are experiencing criminalization at overdoses all the time. And so while we have these Good Samaritan laws, we know that they are not being followed necessarily, and that people are still having a lot of fear about utilizing emergency services. And At the end of the day, we believe at MAP that you should be able to access emergency medical without having police intervention, right? This is a medical emergency. And we know that if there wasn't that fear of police interaction, then people would be much more likely to call 911 and be able to get that emergency support. And, you know, the reality is that people save each other's lives all the time without calling 911. Most of the folks that access our services, that are in our community, are saving each other's lives by giving naloxone, giving rescue breaths. But there are times when we do need to have 911 there. Maybe someone is overdosing on a benzo and we don't know until the naloxone's not working. So we like to be able to have this conversation of, hey, what does this phone call look like? And what's important to be able to present. So first off, we're going to give the location of the emergency and the number that we're calling from. We don't ever have to say that someone's experiencing an overdose. What's most important is that we just give a little brief explanation of what's happening. So my partner's not breathing, my friend's unresponsive. So we give the location, the number, give a little blip about what's happening. And then we encourage folks to put their phone on speaker to let dispatch know that you can't answer all of their questions, because they ask a ton of questions, because their job is to help us figure out the next best step. But we really hope that at the end of your trainings with us, when you get naloxone from us, that you can trust your response, that you know what to do in this moment, that you have that knowledge. There are times when things get really complicated and confusing, and we need to use dispatch and we need to talk to them. And so in that situation, having the phone on speaker, having your hands free is really supportive in moving through the emergency, through that communication while still acting. So again, just to recap, location of the emergency, the number you're calling from, letting them know that someone's not breathing, and then really trusting yourself to be able to move through that response and utilize them when needed. If you don't answer their questions, they're still going to send someone, right? And that's important to know. So next up, I'm going to train you on how to administer naloxone, both the intramuscular, the IM, and the nasal preparation. So Anna's going to make me big for a minute, and I'm kind of getting used to where the camera is, so it might be a little awkward, so bear with me. So for the intramuscular naloxone, there are 2 vials, so 2 doses. Each dose is 1 vial. Each vial is 1 dose. So there are 2 doses and 2 syringes in each of our kits. Our IM naloxone kits come in a bag that looks like this. And so each vial has an orange cap on top, and we're just going to flick that cap off with our thumb or our finger, and that unseals the medication. Then we have that dark gray, sorry, this is the awkward moment, the dark gray circle. This is rubber, and we can puncture through the rubber with the syringe. So the syringes look like this. They're an intramuscular syringe, so they're a long needle, right? We're going to poke through that dark gray rubber circle with the syringe to draw up the medication. So just to note, first off, the naloxone is never filled to the top, right? It's pre-measured. So we're not looking for a full vial. If the tip of the syringe is way at the top of the, sorry, this is like really tripping me up, way at the top of the vial, we're just drawing up air, right? So we don't want that. We want the tip of the syringe right above that metal rim so that we're always drawing up the medication. We don't need to worry about it falling off. It's going to stay on there, and then we can draw the naloxone from the vial into the syringe. And we do that by pulling back on the plunger. So the naloxone has gone from the vial to the barrel of the syringe, and we're ready to administer. Just one note, every vial has the label and then it has that window. And it can be helpful to face that window towards you when you're drawing up so that you can always see the tip of the syringe. So Anna, if you want to go to the slide now.
Got it.
Awesome. So we're going to administer the intramuscular naloxone into a big muscle. If there's some air left in the syringe, we're going to push up on the plunger. Sorry, and I should have, but we'll kind of, okay. Push up on the plunger so that the air out isn't just a tiny bit of naloxone comes out the top. Then we're ready to administer. We're not worried about like air bubbles or anything because we're going into the muscle. So back to that slide. We are going to administer the naloxone at a 90-degree angle into the upper arm or the thigh. And so you can see there are 4 red circles on the screen, and those are great places to administer naloxone. We can also administer naloxone into the butt if we aren't able to access arms or thighs. And so, you know, this is a big needle, like you saw. It's going to go through jeans. It's going to go through Carhartts. It's not going to go through snow pants, Carhartts, and thermals, right? So if someone has a lot of layers on, we either want to expose the site or we want to find a new location. So we're going to administer, like I said, at a 90-degree angle, pushing in on the plunger until the naloxone makes its way from the barrel of the syringe into their body. And I'll just say, like, that uses force, right? Like, we really want to make sure that we're getting through the layers, that we're getting into the muscle. So for the nasal comes in a package that looks like this. Again, one of the preparations is 1 dose. We are going to take it out of the package. It says peel here. We're going to peel there, peel it off, take the nasal out, and then we have this. And once it's out of that package, it's ready to use. So there's no cap or anything. So we'll go ahead and take the nozzle, put it up someone's nostril, and push in on that plunger. It essentially works like a Flonase, right? It sprays up, it makes its way through the mucous membranes to the brain receptor where it will have an effect and allow someone to start breathing again. If we're giving a second dose of the nasal, we want to switch nostrils just in case there's a blockage or damage. And just to note, right, we're assuming that someone is not breathing, they are not going to be inhaling this medication, and they don't need to. It's going to work on its own by moving through the mucous membranes in that way. All right, so usually in these trainings, I pause right now for questions. So I think I'm just actually going to take a little pause and ask if there are any questions just about the IM or the nasal. And you can just put them in the chat box. Okay. I don't see any. Anya, do you see any coming up? Okay, cool. So regardless if we're giving the IM or the nasal preparation, we're waiting 2 to 3 minutes between doses. And we wait 2 to 3 minutes between doses because it just takes time for the naloxone to have an effect. So if we were to give 1 dose or 3 doses in that first 2 to 3 minutes, it's not going to work faster. And I see a question. I'll definitely get to that, the storage, how to safely store it. So we're waiting 2 to 3 minutes between doses. While we wait those 2 to 3 minutes, we can keep track of time on our phone that's maybe on speaker right now, which is helpful because in these moments, time moves in wild ways. And so it's helpful to have that, that reminder, because we know sometimes in these moments we give more naloxone than we need to. And that's not going to cause harm to someone, but it's also going to cause them to experience, more intense withdrawal symptoms. And best practices, we give someone the least amount of naloxone necessary for them to be responsive. So we're going to go back to rescue breathing now. So beginning, Chastity said we're giving 2 rescue breaths, and now we've administered the naloxone. We're waiting the 2 to 3 minutes, and we are going to give 1 breath every 5 seconds. And so that, again, we've tipped their chin back. We've clipped their nose with our fingertips, and we've made a seal of our mouth to theirs. I guess I'll just note that there's risk of transmission of COVID by giving rescue breaths, right? And that doesn't mean that people won't give rescue breaths at this time, but it is really important to be aware of. So maybe someone finds safety in using their own mask and a CPR mask. There's still risk, but there can be some safety in that. Maybe it's really just not safe for you to risk that transmission of COVID, and so you just call 911 and give naloxone. This is, a really complicated time, and we can only show up in ways that are safe for us and in ways that we can. And so if rescue breathing is not something you can do right now, calling 911 and giving naloxone is a really good plan B.
Do what you can live with.
What's that?
Do what you can live with.
Yeah.
Neither answer is wrong. So whatever you can live with as a person, that's your answer.
Yeah, legit. And I guess I'll just say, outside of a pandemic, there's very little risk of transmission of bloodborne illness through mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and rescue breathing. So it's a really safe and really important tool, especially in places where EMS response time is slow. In times when naloxone isn't working, we can keep someone's body oxygenated and keep them alive. And that's meaningful. So we are going to, in that 2 to 3 minutes, while we're waiting for the naloxone to kick in, give the 1 breath every 5 seconds. And just to demonstrate that, it's breath, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, breath, 1 1,000. And we're going to continue in that pattern of 1 breath every 5 seconds, and then giving a dose of naloxone every 2 to 3 minutes. If you haven't called 911 and you're given that second dose, it's probably an important time to call because we just don't know what's going on. So moving into aftercare and support. We want to stick with someone for 60 to 90 minutes after they've received naloxone. Naloxone is going to wear off between 30 and 45 minutes. And certainly, depending on what someone's used, if they still have opioids in their system, the naloxone wears off and the opioids can reattach and they can experience an overdose. But the other reality is that someone's, experiencing withdrawal symptoms, and how you fix withdrawal symptoms is by using. But for that 30 to 45 minutes, while the naloxone is blocking the brain receptor, if someone's using to relieve that discomfort, it's not working. It's just bouncing off. And so it's still building up. And so then when the naloxone wears off, they have a new supply built up in their system that can cause an overdose. I guess I'll just say the Harm Reduction Coalition just put out a really beautiful, I guess it was a social media post, but I assume it's also on their website, with language of welcoming someone back from an overdose. So what does aftercare look like in the framework of a welcoming? And I think that that's really beautiful, and I found it really powerful. Because it is a welcoming someone back, and that looks a lot of different ways for a lot of different people, and we want to respect people's autonomy and choice in this moment. And so, we want to stay with someone for 60 to 90 minutes, but we're never going to force someone to stay with us for 60 to 90 minutes. Maybe we figure out who else they can be with. We're reminding someone what just happened, like it can be really confusing. People cannot remember as they're coming out of an overdose. And so providing that context for what's going on. And then I always just like to recognize that sometimes there's, like fear surrounding, someone responding in a really intense way. And I think, again, a lot of times folks are just kind of drowsy and they're not really sure of what's going on. But also, these are really scary and intense moments for someone. And we all respond to intense, scary moments in a lot of different ways. And that's okay, right? Like that's our right. And so if someone is, coming out of the situation with intensity in a way that is full of fear or anger, I think that's okay. And we can just figure out what it looks like to support someone in that moment, listen to them, hear what, what they want of us in that moment and support. So we'll move into now how to store naloxone, Chas.
So naloxone, like most medications, you want to keep it at room temperature. No extreme heat, no extreme cold. We do use light-proof bag packaging, so it'll, protect it from sunlight. But you don't want to I wouldn't keep it in your car because it's going to freeze. Ideally, like for a woman, if you carry a purse or a bag, like that's great because more often than not, you have it on you. Or, anything that isn't going to compromise it. But with that said, outside of storage, like don't stress about expiration dates. I know a lot of people do and don't think, oh, this is expired, it's useless, and throw it away. It's still going to work. There's lots of studies that show it's still effective. So if you have it, use it. But the main thing really is no extreme temperatures. So whatever works for you, works for you. This is where
I say any naloxone is better than no naloxone. So just use what you have in the moment, right? You just may need to use a little bit more.
Right.
So how to get naloxone? You can reach out to MAP. So here's a couple things. If you're in Maine, we're happy to enroll you as a participant of our program, which is a very low barrier, low key process. Mostly it's just making up a participant code, which is important because then that allows you to be able to get refills from us going forward. So if you're in Maine, call, text, or signal the number on your screen, which is 319-8823. You can email us at info@mainaccesspoints.org, or you can DM us on Facebook or Instagram. Any way that you can reach out to us works, and we can get you the naloxone that you need through mail. If you are outside of Maine and looking for naloxone, you can also reach out to us at the contact information provided, and we'll hook you up with one of our partners who does nationwide naloxone mail delivery. Again, for them, it's a really low barrier process, and happy to get you the info you need for that. If you're looking for program information or slides, feel free to email or call, and we can follow up with any questions you have, or if you want to have a community training for your community. We're doing most of them virtually right now, and would be happy to set that up. So I think we're kind of opening it up to conversations and questions from you all through the chat.
And saying thanks for bearing with us on our first live stream.
Yeah.
Normally we all do these by ourselves, so it's very strange bouncing back and forth.
It's really exciting to see some community distributors that have been joining us today. So shout out to you all who I never in my life did I think I would say shout out. Shout out to you all who are here that do this like really beautiful work in different parts of the state.
I'm going to put some contact info in the chat for some of our other programs. So, of course, we have Naloxone, and we're always happy to train you, make sure you know how to use it. But then we also have other harm reduction supplies that we can get you. So, safer injection supplies, safer disposal containers, kind of the whole gamut when it comes to making sure that you have what you need to use as safely as possible. So I'm going to put those phone numbers in the chat here too, and definitely feel free to text or signal or call, whatever's most comfortable, and we'll make it work. We are providing home deliveries in the counties that we have our mobile programs. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a home delivery. It can be a delivery to a location that works for you. So I'm going to put those in the chat right now.
Are there other questions that have come up for folks or thoughts?
Even if there's none now, as people watch the replay and we see them come through, we'll definitely respond to anything that comes through to us.
Yeah, for sure.
Chastity, what's your number?
370-1042.
Well, thanks everyone so much for tuning in today. This was definitely a test run for us, kind of learning the slides and how everything works. So give us feedback, please. Give us feedback on what you liked about it, what could have been better. We do a lot of these virtual naloxone trainings. I should say Hillary does and Chastity does, and so we'll keep doing those. We'll keep offering those in other ways. Certainly, I think through Zoom, we'll still have some virtual naloxone trainings. And then, of course, we do the one-on-ones anytime you need. But moving forward with this monthly series, we're going to branch out, into some awesome new conversations that Hillary was mentioning. So please subscribe to our channels if you want to make sure you don't miss anything. Like Hillary said, we're going to be talking about Hep C. We're going to be talking about know your rights when it comes to drug possession, paraphernalia possession. Those are actually some topics that we're really getting involved around right now in Maine. I think it's important to share with everyone that, the legislature is starting to work on some new bills, and there's a number of bills that we're following and hopefully going to try to really organize around, especially a bill that would decriminalize the possession of syringes, as well as a bill that would decriminalize possession of small quantities of drug personal possession. So those are two bills that are really important for us, for our participants, for our community, when it comes to making sure people can access the supplies that they need and can minimize the harms of criminalization and incarceration that a lot of folks are currently facing over drug possession and paraphernalia possession. So those are things that we're going to be following, that we'll be sure to post more about on our social media, and that hopefully we can do some information around on our live stream. And then other topics, like I think we're going to work on some safer injection, safer use stuff. We're definitely going to go deep into drug testing and learning more about drug testing kits that you can access to learn about what products are actually in the drug supply right now. So hopefully these are going to be helpful and cool and good ways to connect with us. So please stay tuned, subscribe. We'll obviously keep posting about it, and let us know what else you'd like to see. Because once this kind of first series that we have planned is done, maybe we'll keep them going, and maybe we'll keep adding on topics that you all want to be a part of. So anything else from you guys? Nothing
Thanks
from
for
our side?
spending time here today.
All right. Cool. Well, we will talk with you all soon, and have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.